The Apache warrior stood atop the sun-bleached ridge, his silhouette cutting against the endless western sky like a blade. Roger's reputation spread across the frontier faster than wildfire. Undefeated in battle, untamed by civilization, and unmoved by any woman's charms. The locals whispered his legend in hushed tones, how he once declared with unflinching certainty, "No woman can take my heart." For 15 years, those words held true, until that fateful morning when laughter like wind chimes drew him to the hidden canyon waterfall. There stood Christine, fearlessly tending her wounded horse, her determined eyes meeting his without a trace of the fear he'd come to expect. What would happen when a man who swore never to love meets the one woman brave enough to challenge everything he believes? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun rose over the rugged frontier, casting long shadows across the terrain Roger had called home for 15 years. His weathered hands worked methodically, skinning a jackrabbit caught in one of his traps. Beside him lay his tomahawk, the handle worn smooth from years of use, intricate carvings etched into the wood, telling stories of battles long past. He worked in silence, as was his custom. The townsfolk called him the Alpha Apache, a name whispered with equal parts fear and reverence. Few knew his true lineage, born to a white settler woman and an Apache warrior, belonging fully to neither world, yet commanding respect in both. Roger inspected the rabbit's fur, nodding with satisfaction. The coming winter would require warm pelts. He packed the meat carefully in preserving herbs, waste being a sin in this unforgiving land. His movements were economical, refined through years of survival where hesitation meant death. Memories flickered unbidden across his mind. The army scout who'd trained him to track, the Apache elder who'd shown him their ways after his mother's death, the first man he'd killed, defending a homestead from raiders. Each experience had hardened him, layer upon layer, until his heart became as impenetrable as the mountains surrounding his territory. The distant sound of a wagon train echoed through the valley below. More settlers. They came in increasing numbers now, bringing their wooden structures, their laws, their boundaries. Roger gathered his possessions and moved higher up the ridge, preferring the vantage point that kept him separate but observant. From his perch, he watched the settlers establish camp. Their methods were inefficient, their defenses inadequate. He shook his head. They would learn or they would perish. The frontier offered no middle ground. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Roger descended toward the trading post that marked the edge of civilization. Once monthly, he exchanged furs and meat for the few supplies he couldn't fashion himself: ammunition, salt, occasionally coffee. These necessary interactions were the extent of his concession to the encroaching world of white settlers. "The Apache returns," muttered Silas, the trading post owner, as Roger entered. The other patrons fell silent, some nodding respectfully, others averting their gaze. "5 rabbits, 2 fox," Roger said, placing the bundled furs on the counter. His words were few, his accent a curious blend of proper English and native inflection. "Fair trade for powder, shot, and salt," Silas replied, measuring out the requested items. He'd learned years ago that attempting to shortchange the Apache meant no further business, and possibly worse. As Roger waited, he overheard the whispered conversation from 2 women near the dry. "Goods, that's him, the one they call the Alpha Apache. I heard he's killed 30 men. My husband says he once told Elizabeth Parker that no woman could take his heart when she tried making eyes at him. Can you imagine living all alone like that? They say he knows this territory better than any man alive." Roger collected his supplies without acknowledging the gossip. Their words meant nothing. He had chosen solitude, finding peace in the absence of complications that came with human connection. Women had tried to draw his interest before, with food, with smiles, with promises of comfort. None understood that he required nothing they offered. "Storm coming," Silas commented as Roger prepared to leave. "Big one, by the feel of it," Roger nodded. He'd sensed the changing pressure, noted the behavior of the birds. 3 days, he corrected. Not 2. Outside, he secured his supplies on the sturdy paint horse that had been his companion for 7 years. The animal sensed his mood and stood perfectly still. Another being that understood the value of silent communication. As he mounted, Roger's gaze fell upon a new structure being raised at the edge of town, a church. Another sign of permanent settlement. Soon there would be a school, more businesses, the structures of civilization that would push the wilderness further away. That night, camped high in his preferred canyon, Roger sat before a small, carefully maintained fire. The flames reflected in his dark eyes as he examined a new deer horn handle he was carving for his hunting knife. His hands moved with practiced precision, each cut deliberate and controlled. Yet something felt different tonight. A restlessness he couldn't name stirred within him. Perhaps it was the coming storm, or the growing encroachment of settlers. Perhaps it was something else entirely. Roger looked to the stars, the same stars his Apache father had used for guidance. They offered no answer to his unspoken question. For the first time in many years, sleep did not come easily to the man who acknowledged no master, followed no law but nature's, and claimed to need no companion. The wind changed direction, bringing with it a scent of distant rain and something else, something that would soon challenge everything the Alpha Apache believed about himself. The wagon creaked in protest as it navigated the uneven terrain, each jolt sending ripples of pain through Christine's already aching body. 3 weeks on the trail had taught her the particular discomforts of westward travel, yet she refused to voice complaint. The leather-bound book in her lap, her father's medical journal, provided both distraction and purpose during the difficult journey. "Miss Christine, we'll be setting camp soon," called Jacob, the wagon train leader. "Found a decent spot with water nearby." She nodded appreciatively, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. At 26, Christine Weber carried herself with a dignity that belied the tragedy marking her recent past. Widowed just 6 months earlier when influenza claimed her husband, she had shocked Philadelphia society by selling their modest townhome and joining a westward expedition instead of remarrying as expected. "Your Herb's doing all right?" asked Martha, the only other single woman in their company. "My Thomas has that cough again. I've some horehounds saved specially for him," Christine replied, patting the small wooden chest secured beside her. Inside lay dozens of carefully labeled pouches, her growing collection of medicinal plants, some brought from back east, others gathered along the trail. Her husband, Michael, had encouraged her interest in natural medicine, unusual though it was for a woman of her standing. Once camp was established, Christine tended to young Thomas before seeing to her own needs. Her bay mare, Penny, watched attentively as Christine examined the animal's foreleg, where a stone had caused minor swelling the previous day. "Almost better. Old girl," she murmured, applying a poultice of yarrow. The horse nuzzled her shoulder in response. Later, as twilight painted the western sky in shades of amber and violet, Christine found herself the reluctant center of attention at the main campfire. "But surely you'll be looking for a suitable arrangement once we reach Fort Laramie," Mrs. Donovan said, her tone making clear what arrangement meant. "A woman alone simply cannot manage a homestead claim." Christine sipped her tea, letting the moment stretch before answering. "I find, Mrs. Donovan, that cannot is often confused with should not. My late husband taught science at university, yet I was the one who mended our roof after the storm of '68. Several men chuckled, while Mrs. Donovan's mouth pinched tight in disapproval. "My father believed education shouldn't be limited by one's sex," Christine continued more gently. "He taught me that useful knowledge has no gender. Knowledge won't protect you from hostiles," rumbled Mr. Fletcher, the oldest man in their company. "There's talk of a particularly dangerous Indian in these parts, some kind of half-breed who's killed more men than winter fever." "Now, Thomas, don't go frightening the ladies with those tales," his wife scolded. Though her eyes betrayed her own unease, Christine said nothing. but her hand moved unconsciously to the small locket around her neck. Inside wasn't a portrait as most assumed, but a tiny folded map her father had drawn, showing the valley where he'd once traded peacefully with the local tribes. That valley was her destination, the place where she hoped to establish not just a home, but a purpose. In her tent that night, by the glow of a small candle, Christine made entries in her own journal. She documented new plants observed, treatments administered, and personal reflections too private to share around the campfire. The pages contained her true voice, unrestrained by the proprieties expected of a woman in public. "Observed prickly pear cactus today," she wrote. "Local usage unknown, but similar varieties used for inflammation by southern tribes. Will attempt careful collection tomorrow." She paused, quill hovering above paper. Then, almost as confession, "I do not miss Philadelphia. The constant reminders of Michael, the pitying glances, the unsubtly presented bachelors. Here, despite hardship, I feel possibility in each breath. Father always said the frontier strips away pretense, leaving only what's essential. Perhaps here I might finally discover what is essential in me." Dawn broke with unusual clarity the next morning. While others still slept, Christine slipped away from camp, following a narrow game trail toward the sound of running water. Penny walked obediently behind her, the mare's injured leg much improved. The trail opened suddenly to reveal a hidden canyon, far more lush than the surrounding countryside. A waterfall cascaded down moss-covered rocks, creating a small but deep pool below. Christine stood transfixed, the beauty of the place striking her with almost physical force. "This is it," she whispered to herself. Something about this hidden pocket of wilderness spoke to her. It wasn't her father's valley. They were still weeks away from that, but in this moment she felt a certainty that had eluded her since Michael's death. She would return to this place. Something important awaited her here. Roger moved like a shadow through the dawn-lit forest, tracking a buck whose prince promised meat for a week if he could claim it. 3 days had passed since he'd sensed that unexplainable shift in the air. The storm he'd predicted had come and gone, washing the world clean, but doing nothing to ease the strange restlessness plaguing him. His hand rested on the weathered leather of his hunting satchel, fingers tracing the intricate beadwork his mother had crafted before fever took her 20 years prior. The geometric patterns of red, white, and black beads told the story of his lineage, both Apache warrior and white healer, a reminder of belonging nowhere completely. The buck's trail led toward the hidden canyon, a place Roger visited rarely despite its abundant water. Something about its secluded beauty seemed to demand solitude even greater than his own. As he approached the canyon rim, the distant sound of laughter, bright and unburdened, stopped him cold. Human laughter. A woman's laughter. Here, in his territory, Roger crouched low, moving with practiced silence toward the canyon edge. Peering down, he saw what no amount of frontier experience could have prepared him for. A young woman in a simple dress with sleeves rolled to her elbows, standing knee-deep in the pool beneath the waterfall. Beside her, partially submerged, stood a bay mare whose leg the woman appeared to be treating. "That's it, Penny," the woman's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "The cold water will help with the swelling." Roger remained perfectly still, his presence undetected. The woman's hair, caught in the first golden light of day, shone like burnished copper. Her movements were purposeful, confident in their solitude. She spoke occasionally to the horse in a tone Roger recognized from his mother, gentle but firm, expecting to be heeded. Against his better judgment, Roger shifted for a better view. A small stone dislodged beneath his moccasin, tumbling down the canyon wall. The woman's head snapped up, her body tensing. "Who's there?" she called, one hand moving to her waist, where Roger noted the outline of a small pistol. Cursing silently at his carelessness, Roger stood, allowing himself to be seen. No point pretending now. Better to assert his territorial claim directly. He descended the path with deliberate steps, neither hurrying nor attempting stealth. The woman backed deeper into the pool, positioning herself protectively beside her horse, but did not draw the pistol. Her eyes, a startling clear green, tracked his approach without wavering. "This is Apache land," Roger said when he reached the pool's edge, his voice rough from disuse. The woman's chin lifted slightly. "I was given to understand this was unclaimed territory. If I've trespassed, I apologize." Her proper Eastern accent surprised him, as did her composure. Most settlers would be scrambling away by now, terror plain on their faces. This woman showed caution, certainly, but not fear. "Your camp is 2 miles south," Roger stated. "You're alone." "I am." She remained still, evaluating him with unsettling directness. "My horse needed treatment. The cold water here is better for inflammation than the muddy creek near camp." Roger's gaze shifted to the mare, noting the slight swelling on its foreleg and the poultice of herbs tied carefully around it. The treatment showed knowledge. "You're far from Philadelphia," he observed, recognizing the quality of her dress despite its trail-worn condition. Surprise flickered across her features. "How did— Your boots, Eastern-made. New, but already adapting to Western use." His eyes returned to hers. "Dangerous to wander alone." "Are you the danger they warned me about?" she asked, a hint of something, not quite challenge, not quite amusement in her voice. "The Alpha Apache who's killed more men than winter fever?" Roger felt an unfamiliar sensation, something between irritation and grudging respect. "If I were, you would not be asking." To his astonishment, she laughed, the same bright sound that had drawn him to the canyon. "A fair point. I'm Christine Weber." She paused. "And you are?" "Roger." The name felt strange on his tongue when spoken to a settler, especially a woman. He rarely introduced himself, being more often spoken about than spoken to. Christine nodded, as if they were meeting at a social gathering rather than alone in wilderness. "Well, Roger, since you haven't shot me or demanded I leave immediately, may I finish tending to my horse?" Without waiting for permission, she turned back to the mare, running water gently over its leg. The gesture displayed either remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness. Roger wasn't certain which. "The yarrow helps," he found himself saying, "but burdock root would work better for that swelling." She glanced up, genuine interest replacing wariness. "Burdock grows here? I haven't found any yet, north side of the canyon." Wide leaves, purple flowers. Roger took a step backward, suddenly uncomfortable with the ease of the exchange. This wasn't how encounters with settlers were supposed to proceed. There should be fear, hasty retreats, muttered prayers, or foolish bravado, not calm conversation about medicinal herbs. "I'll remember that," Christine said. "Thank you." Roger nodded once, then turned to leave as abruptly as he'd arrived. He could feel her eyes following him as he climbed the canyon wall, an unsettling sensation down his spine. Only when he reached the rim did he permit himself a backward glance. She had returned to her task, moving with the same quiet confidence he'd first observed. Something about her lingered in his mind, like an unfinished song. For the first time in 15 years, Roger questioned his solitary path. The wagon circle buzzed with activity as Christine returned to camp, leading Penny, whose gait already seemed improved after the cold water treatment. She nodded greetings to several families, busy with morning chores, the normalcy of the scene contrasting sharply with her encounter at the waterfall. Martha approached, balancing her young son on one hip. "Where'd you wander off to so early?" Jacob was about to send a search party. Christine stroked Penny's neck. "Just found a better spot to treat this one's leg. There's a lovely pool fed by a small waterfall not far from here." She debated mentioning Roger, but decided against it. The memory of their strange interaction felt oddly private, something she wasn't ready to share with the gossip-hungry camp. "You shouldn't go off alone," Martha admonished, lowering her voice. "Mr. Fletcher says we're in dangerous territory now." "I was perfectly safe," Christine replied, unpacking her saddlebag. Her fingers brushed against a small brass spyglass, her husband's prized possession. Michael had used it for stargazing, claiming it brought the heavens closer. Now Christine found herself raising it occasionally to examine distant landscapes, searching for something undefined on the horizon. Jacob summoned everyone to the center of the camp, mid-morning, his weathered face more serious than usual. "We'll rest here another day," he announced. "Scout reports show a washout on the trail ahead. Gives us time to repair wagon wheels and restock supplies." Whispers rippled through the gathered settlers. An extra day meant safety concerns. What about the Indian threat? Someone called out. Jacob's expression tightened. "We maintain watches as usual. No fires after dark, no wandering from camp." As the crowd dispersed, Christine found herself approached by Elias Hatcher, a trader traveling with their party. Something about his calculated smile always made her uneasy. "Miss Weber," he began, his voice smooth as river stones. "I heard you found a waterfall nearby. Perhaps you'd show me?" "For the botanical opportunities." Before Christine could formulate a polite refusal, Mrs. Donovan inserted herself into the conversation. "Did I hear correctly that you went exploring alone this morning?" The older woman's tone carried accusation rather than concern. "After all the warnings?" Christine straightened her spine. "I didn't go far." She encountered someone, piped up young Thomas, who had apparently overheard more than Christine realized. "I heard her telling Penny about the Apache man." Sudden silence fell over the nearby settlers. Mrs. Donovan's hand flew to her throat. "The savage? You saw him and lived to tell?" "He's a man, not a savage," Christine corrected automatically. "And yes, we spoke briefly. He was civil." "Civil?" Fletcher scoffed, joining the growing circle. "That half-breed has killed more settlers than anyone can count." "Those are rumors," Christine countered. "He actually offered helpful advice about local medicinal plants." Hatcher's eyes narrowed with interest. "You don't say? And did this civil Apache happen to mention his territory? Gold deposits? Water sources?" "We discussed herbs, Mr. Hatcher, not geography." Something in his calculating gaze made Christine protectively vague. "I heard he once scalped 6 cavalrymen," offered someone. From the back of the crowd, "They say he can disappear like smoke," added another. "I heard a woman from the Henderson train tried to tame him," Mrs. Donovan said, lowering her voice dramatically. "He told her no woman could ever take his heart, then vanished into the wilderness." Christine fought the urge to roll her eyes at the increasingly fantastical tales. The man she'd met was intimidating, certainly, but hardly the monster of their imaginations. "Whatever you may have heard," she said firmly, "he had ample opportunity to harm me and did not. I would appreciate if we could focus on more pressing matters, like preparing for the journey ahead." As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Hatcher lingered. "You should be careful, Miss Weber," he said, his concern not reaching his eyes. "A woman alone attracts attention. My offer of partnership still stands. Your land claim would complement my trading business nicely. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher, but I remain uninterested in any partnership." Christine turned away, busying herself with Penny's saddle. "Independence is an admirable but dangerous quality on the frontier," he called after her, the words carrying a subtle threat. That evening, Christine noticed Jacob posting extra guards around the perimeter. From her wagon, she watched the golden sunset paint the distant canyon where the waterfall lay hidden. Somewhere out there, the man called Roger was likely making his evening camp. Did he live in a cabin, a cave? Did he ever long for conversation as the night grew dark? She caught herself mid-thought, surprised by the direction of her mind. Opening her journal, she began to write about their encounter, describing his unexpected gentleness when speaking of the herbs, the intelligence in his dark eyes, the way he moved through the wilderness as if part of it. A sudden prickling sensation made her look up. In the fading light, she could have sworn she saw a silhouette on the distant ridge, watching, waiting. Christine raised Michael's spyglass, adjusting it carefully, but the figure, if ever there, had vanished. Like smoke, she thought, remembering the settler's words. She closed her journal, oddly comforted rather than frightened by the possibility of being observed. The Alpha Apache had staked his claim on this territory long before their wagon train arrived. Christine found herself hoping they would meet again. Dawn had barely broken when Christine slipped away from camp again. She'd told Martha she needed specific plants for her remedies. Not entirely untrue, though the burdock root Roger had mentioned wasn't her only motivation. Penny followed willingly, her injured leg much improved after yesterday's treatment. Christine carried a small leather-wrapped bundle tied with sinew, her grandfather's hunting knife. The 6-inch blade with its bone handle had been her father's final gift to her, pressed into her hands with whispered instructions on how a proper lady might still defend herself in the West. She had never used it against anything more threatening than stubborn roots. But its weight at her belt provided comfort. The morning mist still clung to the canyon when she arrived. Christine tethered Penny near fresh grass and approached the waterfall alone, her steps hesitant now. What if yesterday's encounter had been a fluke? What if Roger had already moved on, annoyed by the encroachment on his solitude? Movement near the north wall caught her attention, a shadow detaching itself from deeper shadows. Roger emerged, carrying several large leaves of what Christine immediately recognized as burdock. They regarded each other in silence for a long moment. Christine noted details she'd missed in yesterday's surprise, the intricate braiding in his long black hair, the precision-sewn buckskins, the weathered lines around eyes that held more intelligence than wildness. "You returned," Roger said finally, his tone revealing nothing. "As did you," Christine countered, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. Roger approached, extending the burdock leaves. "For your horse." The simple gesture startled her more than any threat could have. "Thank you," she said, accepting them. Their fingers brushed momentarily, his calloused, hers beginning to toughen after weeks on the trail. "Your camp prepares to move on," he observed. "Tomorrow," Christine confirmed. "The trail should be passable by then," Roger nodded, his gaze moving past her to survey the canyon. "There are better routes west than the one your guide has chosen." Christine weighed his words. "You know this territory well." "It knows me." The distinction intrigued her. Christine settled on a sun-warmed rock, beginning to crush the burdock leaves with a smooth stone she'd collected. Roger watched her technique with critical eyes. "You're grinding too hard," he said after a moment. "You'll lose the oils. Perhaps you could show me," Christine offered, moving aside slightly. Roger hesitated, then sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but near enough that Christine could detect the scent of sage and pine that clung to him. He took the stone from her, demonstrating a gentler, circular motion. "My mother used these for inflammation," he said quietly. She learned from her Apache husband. Christine absorbed this rare personal detail. "Your father?" Roger nodded once. "She was a settler's daughter. Chose the Apache way when she chose him." "That explains your excellent English," Christine ventured, a half-smile, there and gone so quickly Christine nearly missed it. "My mother insisted. Said words were weapons and tools both. A wise woman." She was. The past tense hung between them. Christine accepted the crushed leaves back, their bitter scent sharp in the morning air. "And your father?" "Killed by soldiers when I was 12. They claimed he raided a homestead. He did not. The matter-of-fact delivery didn't mask the old pain beneath." Christine nodded, understanding that further questions would not be welcome. Instead, she asked, "Could you show me where more burdock grows? And perhaps other medicinal plants?" Roger studied her, seeming to weigh her motives. "Why do you travel alone?" "No husband. Widowed," Christine replied, the familiar ache duller now. "Influenza took him last winter, and still you came west. Especially then," she corrected. "Philadelphia held too many ghosts." Understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared loss, different yet similar. Roger stood abruptly. "I will show you the plants. Then you should return to your camp." They spent the next hour moving along the canyon's edge. Roger pointed out plants Christine recognized from her books, and others completely new to her. She pulled out a small notebook, making quick sketches and notes as he explained their uses. This one, Roger indicated a scrubby bush with yellow flowers, stops bleeding. This, he pointed to a feathery plant, helps with fever dreams. Christine absorbed his knowledge eagerly, noting how he spoke of the plants with respect, almost kinship. His knowledge surpassed her formal botanical education, rooted in lived experience rather than academic study. "Your people know much about healing," she observed. "Survival," he corrected. "Knowledge that serves life." As they worked their way back toward the waterfall, Christine noticed a jagged scar running down Roger's forearm. Without thinking, she reached out, her healer's instinct overriding propriety. "This healed poorly," she observed. Roger stiffened but didn't pull away. "Arrow, 3 summers ago." Christine examined it with professional detachment, though her pulse quickened at the casual contact. "I have a salve that might soften the scar tissue. Make movement easier in cold weather? Your camp will miss you," Roger said, gently reclaiming his arm. Reality intruded. Christine realized how long she'd been gone, how suspicious her absence would seem. Yet she found herself reluctant to leave this peaceful canyon and the unexpected ease she felt in Roger's company. "Will you be here tomorrow?" The question escaped before she could reconsider it. Roger's expression remained unreadable. Perhaps. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal either. Christine gathered her notebook and the collected herbs, then whistled for Penny. "Thank you for the knowledge," she said formally. Roger inclined his head slightly. "Until next time, Christine Weber." The sound of her name in his deep voice followed her all the way back to camp. The wagon train's progress slowed to a painful crawl as the terrain grew more challenging. Axles broke, animals faltered, and tempers frayed beneath the relentless western sun. Christine moved among the travelers, offering willow bark tea for pain and encouragement where medicine couldn't help. "We're running dangerously low on supplies," Jacob announced during the evening gathering. "Flour's nearly gone, and ammunition won't last if we encounter trouble." Murmurs of concern rippled through the exhausted settlers. Christine's own provisions remained adequate thanks to her careful rationing, but she'd noticed the hollow cheeks of the children, the tightening belts of the men. "There's a trading post 3 days north," Elias Hatcher interjected smoothly. "I've done business there before. With your permission, Jacob, I could lead a small party to replenish our necessities." Relief washed over the gathered faces. Christine watched Hatcher carefully, noting how his gaze swept the crowd, assessing reactions like a merchant evaluating goods. Jacob nodded reluctantly. "We'd be grateful, Mr. Hatcher." "I'll need 4 men and the strongest wagon," Hatcher continued. "And perhaps," his eyes settled on Christine, "someone with medical knowledge, should we encounter difficulties." "I'll go," offered Mrs. Fletcher promptly. "I've nursed 6 children through every ailment imaginable." Hatcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. "With respect, ma'am, we need someone who can ride separately if necessary." "Miss Weber seems the obvious choice." Christine felt the weight of expectant gazes. The prospect of traveling with Hatcher unsettled her, yet refusing would appear selfish when the group's welfare hung in the balance. "I'll prepare my things," she agreed, avoiding Hatcher's triumphant look. Later, as Christine packed her medical supplies, Martha visited her wagon. "Be careful around that man," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Something about the way he watches you." "I can manage Elias Hatcher," Christine assured her, though her hand instinctively touched the pearl-handled derringer tucked into her skirt pocket, a wedding gift from Michael's mother, who'd called it a lady's final argument. "It's not just that," Martha continued. "Yesterday I overheard him speaking with Fletcher about land claims near Silver Creek, your father's valley." Christine paused. "What about it?" "Something about water rights being worth more than gold once the railroad comes through. He seemed very interested in your particular claim." Before Christine could respond, a shadow fell across the wagon opening. Hatcher stood there, his tall frame blocking the fading daylight. "A word, Miss Weber?" "In private." Martha squeezed Christine's hand before departing, her worried glance speaking volumes. Hatcher entered without invitation, his expensive coat incongruous among the practical trappings of trail life. He removed his hat, revealing slicked-back hair that had somehow remained immaculate despite weeks of travel. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began without preamble. My situation requires no consideration. Mr. Hatcher, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. A woman alone claiming land in contested territory. It's admirable, but ultimately impractical. I've managed impracticality before, Christine replied evenly. Perhaps. But winter comes early in these mountains. Indians grow desperate when game grows scarce. He stepped closer, his cologne overpowering in the confined space. I have connections, influence with territorial authorities. As my wife, your claim would be secured beyond question. Christine blinked, momentarily speechless at his directness. Mr. Hatcher, if this is a proposal, a practical arrangement, he corrected, reaching for her hand. You need protection. I admire your spirit. Together we could establish something significant. The trading post I mentioned could become a settlement, then a town. With the right woman managing social affairs, Christine withdrew her hand firmly. While I appreciate your concern for my welfare, I must decline. My plans don't include remarriage. His pleasant expression hardened. Don't be foolish. The frontier devours the unprepared, especially women with unconventional ideas. Nevertheless, my answer remains no. Hatcher replaced his hat with deliberate slowness. Consider carefully before our departure tomorrow. Options diminish quickly in the wilderness. He paused at the wagon entrance. I've known many independent spirits, broken by one harsh winter alone. It would be regrettable to see that happen to you. The threat lingered in the air after his departure. Christine's hands trembled slightly as she continued packing, her mind racing. The supply expedition suddenly felt like a trap, yet refusing now would only increase suspicion. As darkness fell, she slipped away from camp once more. She needed space to think, and increasingly, the Waterfall Canyon represented clarity amid confusion. Perhaps Roger would be there? The thought came unbidden, surprising in its intensity. The night air carried a hint of autumn's approach as she picked her way carefully along the now familiar path. Rounding the final bend, Christine stopped abruptly. A small fire burned near the pool, its light revealing Roger seated beside it. Apparently waiting, their eyes met across the distance, and Christine felt an inexplicable sense of homecoming that had nothing to do with wagons or settlements or proper society. Without hesitation, she moved toward the fire, toward him, leaving Hatcher's threats and the wagon train's problems temporarily behind. The fire cast dancing shadows across Roger's face as Christine approached. He stood, a fluid movement that spoke of ingrained vigilance. You shouldn't travel these canyons after dark, he said, his tone more concerned than reproving. I needed somewhere to think, Christine replied, settling on a flat rock near the fire. The warmth felt welcoming after the cooling night air. Your presence suggests you expected company, a barely perceptible lift of his shoulders, neither confirmation nor denial. Roger remained standing, his posture relaxed yet alert, like a wild creature tolerating proximity but ready for flight. Your camp prepares for a journey, he observed. Christine looked up sharply. You've been watching us. I watch all who pass through my territory. She considered asking how much he'd observed of her conversation with Hatcher, but decided against it. Instead, she studied the fire, gathering her thoughts. A party leaves tomorrow for supplies, she said finally. I'm to accompany them. Roger crouched across the fire from her, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. The man with the city clothes. You don't trust him. It wasn't a question. Christine sighed, tension easing from her shoulders in Roger's straightforward presence. Elias Hatcher. He proposed marriage tonight, a practical arrangement, he called it. Something flickered across Roger's features, quickly controlled. And your answer? No, of course, she smiled faintly. Though he seemed to consider that merely an opening position in a negotiation, Roger fed another branch to the fire. Men like him view the world as property to be claimed, including women, Christine agreed. But I've had one marriage of convenience that fortunately became more. I won't enter another without... She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate feelings still forming within herself. Without? Roger prompted. Without fire, she finished simply. Their eyes met across the flames, understanding passing between them that required no elaboration. Roger reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew something that caught the firelight, a wooden flute, small enough to fit in his palm. The instrument was simply carved but polished to a lustrous finish through years of handling. "My father made this," Roger said, turning it slowly. "From lightning-struck cedar. He said such wood carries power between worlds." Christine leaned forward, drawn by this unexpected glimpse into his past. "Will you play it?" Roger hesitated, then raised the flute to his lips. A soft, haunting melody emerged, not sad exactly, but carrying echoes of loneliness that resonated in the canyon walls. Christine closed her eyes, allowing the music to wash over her. The simple tune spoke more eloquently than words of the solitary life Roger had led. When the last note faded, silence settled comfortably between them. "That was beautiful," Christine said quietly. "A song of homecoming," Roger explained, returning the flute to his pouch. "My mother would play it when my father returned from hunting. You miss them still? They are part of me." He gestured to the canyon around them. "As this land is part of me." Christine nodded, understanding his connection to this place in a way she couldn't have before leaving Philadelphia. "My father spoke of Western territories with such passion. He traveled through this region when I was a child, trading with native tribes. He believed different peoples could live together, learn from each other. Some can," Roger acknowledged. "Most cannot, because they choose not to try," Christine countered. "Fear makes barriers seem insurmountable." Roger studied her with new intensity. "You feel no fear now? Alone with the savage Apache?"
Should I?
She met his gaze steadily, his mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but warming his stern features. "Perhaps not tonight." Christine found herself smiling in return. Something was changing between them, a bridge forming over the divide of their different worlds. "The trader," Roger said abruptly. "He wants your land. How did you—" "I've tracked him before. He seeks water rights in Silver Creek Valley." Christine's eyes widened. "That's precisely where my father's claim is located." "The claim you traveled to establish?" "Yes." She frowned, pieces falling into place. "Martha overheard him discussing water rights with another settler. Once the railroad comes, water becomes more valuable than gold," Roger finished. "The creek on your father's claim feeds 3 valleys. Control that water, and you control all settlement in the region," Christine concluded, cold realization spreading through her. "That's why he's so determined to form an arrangement with me," Roger nodded grimly. "His kind take what they want. If one approach fails, they try another. I'm to travel with him tomorrow," Christine said, concern creeping into her voice. "With just 4 men from our train, all friends of his choosing." The air between them changed, tension replacing the earlier warmth. Roger's expression hardened. "Don't go. I must. Refusing now would only raise suspicions, and the group genuinely needs supplies." Christine leaned forward earnestly. "But I'll be careful. I have means to protect myself." Roger's skepticism was evident. He rose and moved around the fire, closing the distance between them. Christine felt her breath catch as he crouched before her, his face now inches from hers. "If you must go," he said, voice low and intense, "be watchful. Trust no convenience, no kindness from him." "I won't," she promised. Roger reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. When she remained still, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, with surprising gentleness. "Return to this place in 7 days," he said. "I will wait." The simple declaration carried weight beyond its words. Christine nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Far in the distance, thunder rumbled, a storm approaching from the mountains. "I should go," she whispered, though everything within her resisted the thought. Roger stood, offering his hand. Christine took it, allowing him to help her up. Their hands remained joined a moment longer than necessary, the contact sending warmth up her arm. 7 days, she repeated. "A promise." Then she turned and headed back toward camp, feeling his eyes following her long after the darkness swallowed her form. Christine had barely reached the halfway point back to camp when the storm broke with sudden ferocity. Lightning split the sky, followed instantly by deafening thunder. Then came the rain, Not the gentle showers of the east, but a violent deluge that within moments soaked her to the skin. She sought shelter beneath an overhanging ledge, but the driving wind pushed the rain sideways, offering little protection. Darkness made the trail treacherous, each lightning flash revealing glistening rocks and mud beginning to flow downhill. You shouldn't have left. Christine spun to find Roger directly behind her, materializing like a spirit from the storm. Water streamed from his long hair, plastering it to his shoulders. "I can't stay out all night," she shouted over the storm's fury. "You can't return in this." He gestured toward the trail, where a small surge of water now flowed. Flash floods, dangerous. As if to emphasize his point, lightning struck nearby, illuminating a cascade of mud sliding across the path she'd need to take. "There's shelter," Roger continued, pointing back toward the canyon. "Until the storm passes." Christine hesitated only briefly before nodding. Roger led her back up the trail, moving with confident ease despite the darkness. Twice he caught her arm when she slipped on the increasingly muddy ground. His grip strong but gentle, they bypassed the waterfall, continuing along the canyon wall until Roger paused before what appeared to be a solid rock face. Only when lightning flashed again did Christine see the narrow opening, a crevice just wide enough for a person to slip through. Roger entered first, then reached back to guide her. Inside, the space opened surprisingly, revealing a small cave with a ceiling just high enough to stand beneath. The sound of rain became muted, more distant. "You're shivering," Roger observed, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Christine wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold she'd become. Roger moved to a dark corner, returning with an armload of wood. "You keep supplies here?" she asked, watching as he expertly arranged kindling. "I keep supplies in many places." He struck a spark using flint and steel from a pouch at his waist, nurturing the tiny flame with patient breath until it caught. As the fire grew, Christine took in their shelter. The cave was clearly a place Roger used regularly. A bedroll of animal hides lay against one wall. Small bundles of herbs hung from rocky outcroppings to dry. Several weapons, a bow, extra knives, were stored neatly along a natural shelf in the rock. Most striking was a worn saddle blanket hanging on the wall, its geometric patterns unmistakably Apache in design. Beside it hung a tarnished silver cross on a leather cord. "Your parents?" Christine asked softly, indicating the contrasting symbols. Roger nodded, feeding small branches to the growing fire. "My mother kept her faith. My father respected her choice." The simple statement contained volumes about the relationship that had produced him, a bridge between worlds, like Roger himself. "You should remove your wet clothes," he said practically, turning to rummage through a deerskin pack. "Hypothermia kills quickly in the mountains." Christine felt her cheeks warm despite the chill. "I'm not—" He extended a buckskin shirt, larger than the one he wore. "You can wrap in this while yours dries." Noting the clear practicality of his suggestion and the fact that he seemed completely unmoved by any impropriety, Christine nodded. "Turn around, please." Roger complied without comment, busying himself with building up the fire. Christine quickly removed her sodden dress, wringing it out before hanging it on a rocky protrusion near the flames. Roger's shirt draped to her knees, the soft leather warmer than she'd expected. "You can turn back now." Roger glanced at her, then removed his own wet shirt in a single fluid motion. Christine tried not to stare at the lean, muscled torso now revealed, bronze skin illuminated by firelight. Various scars mapped a life of survival, some clearly from violence, others from the everyday dangers of frontier existence. He hung his shirt beside hers, then sat cross-legged near the fire. Christine joined him, grateful for the growing warmth. "How did you find this place?" she asked, breaking the silence. "As a boy, hiding from cavalry soldiers." His expression darkened momentarily. "After my father died, I lived in such places for years, moving like a ghost between Apache camps and white settlements, belonging to neither. That must have been lonely." He shrugged. "Loneliness is safer than false belonging." The fire crackled between them as Christine absorbed his words. And now? Where do you belong now? Roger gestured to the cave, the canyon beyond. Here, the in-between places. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the cave entrance, followed by thunder that shook small pebbles from the ceiling. I've never seen such storms, Christine admitted. In Philadelphia, rain is just rain. Here, nature reminds us of our proper size, Roger replied. From a pouch, he removed pemmican, offering her a portion. Eat. The storm may last until morning. They shared the simple meal in companionable silence. Outside, the storm continued its assault. But within the cave, a different kind of energy gathered, quieter but no less powerful. Tell me about your Philadelphia life, Roger said unexpectedly. Christine looked up in surprise. Why? I've never been east of the Mississippi. A trace of curiosity softened his usually guarded expression. What makes a woman leave such comfort for this wilderness? It wasn't always comfortable, Christine began, finding herself describing her childhood, her marriage to Michael, the suffocating expectations that had always chafed against her nature. Roger listened with unexpected attention, asking occasional questions that revealed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. In turn, Christine drew him out about Apache customs, his survival skills, the changes he'd witnessed as settlements pushed ever westward. Hours passed. The storm gradually subsided to a gentle rainfall. Neither suggested returning to camp. When Christine finally yawned, unable to suppress her exhaustion, Roger arranged his bedroll for her use. Sleep, he said, settling himself against the opposite wall. I'll keep watch. You won't sleep? I rarely do. Not deeply. Christine hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her hanging dress, retrieving a small object. I want you to have this, she said, extending her hand. In her palm lay a simple silver compass, its needle swinging gently north. My husband's, she explained. He taught celestial navigation at university, but always said a man should carry earthly guidance as well. Roger looked from the compass to her face, clearly understanding the significance of such a gift. I can't, please, Christine interrupted. Consider it a token of gratitude. For shelter from the storm. They both recognized the symbolic weight behind her words. After a moment's hesitation, Roger accepted the compass, his fingers brushing hers. Thank you, he said simply. Christine settled onto the bedroll, watching as Roger studied the compass before carefully placing it in his medicine pouch. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was his silhouette against the dying fire, steady and watchful. Like a guardian spirit from her father's frontier tales, dawn painted the eastern sky with pale gold when Christine awoke. For a moment she lay disoriented, the stone ceiling above her unfamiliar, until memory returned. The storm, the cave, Roger. She sat up to find herself alone, though the small fire still burned. Her dress, now dry, had been folded neatly beside her. She changed quickly, smoothing her hair as best she could without a mirror. Outside, the world had been transformed by the storm. Water still dripped from canyon walls, and small rivulets carved new paths through the earth. The air smelled of sage and wet stone, impossibly clean. Roger stood at the cave entrance, watching the awakening day. He'd replaced his buckskin shirt with another, this one adorned with subtle beadwork along the shoulders. The trail to your camp is clear now, he said, without turning. Though muddy, Christine moved to stand beside him, suddenly awkward in the morning light. The intimacy of the night before, sharing stories by firelight, sleeping under his protection, seemed dreamlike now. I should hurry back. They'll be looking for me. Roger nodded, his profile stern against the brightening sky. I'll show you the quickest path. They descended the canyon in silence, Christine occasionally stealing glances at her companion. Something had shifted between them during the night, a boundary crossed, though not the one society would most condemn. Near the halfway point, Roger paused, withdrawing a rolled leather bundle from his belt pouch. He unfolded it to reveal a finely crafted knife in a beaded sheath, smaller than a hunting knife but larger than a penknife. Apache women carry these, he said, holding it out to her. For protection and daily tasks, Christine accepted it, admiring the careful construction. The handle was antler, polished smooth, with a small turquoise stone inlaid at the pommel. "It's beautiful," she said, testing the blade's edge with her thumb. "Sharp enough to slice cleanly, precisely balanced. Wear it hidden," Roger advised. "The trader, Hatcher. Don't turn your back on him." Christine slipped the knife into her pocket, nodding. "I'll be careful. The supply journey should only take 6 days. I'll meet you at the Waterfall on the 7th, as promised." Roger's expression darkened. "I've heard rumors of trouble to the north. Renegade Crow displaced by the army, making raids on travelers. Is that your way of suggesting I shouldn't go?" "It's my way of saying be watchful." His eyes met hers directly. "Hatcher will not protect you if danger comes. He will protect himself first, always." Christine thought of Hatcher's smooth words, his calculating eyes. "I believe you're right, but the group needs medical knowledge and—" She hesitated. "I need to understand exactly what he's planning." "Knowledge is its own protection." Roger studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod of acceptance. "The compass," he said, touching the pouch where he'd stored her gift. "It always shows true direction, even when clouds hide the stars." "Yes," she agreed softly, understanding his meaning. "It does." They continued down the trail, Roger occasionally pointing out safer footing where the storm had washed away parts of the path. As they neared the point where the settler camp would become visible, he stopped. "I go no further," he said. "Their rifles often fire before their eyes see clearly." Christine nodded, suddenly reluctant to return to the wagon train and all it represented. Civilization encroaching on wilderness, the rigid expectations of proper society, her uncertain future. "Roger," she began, then faltered, unsure what she meant to say. He waited, patient as the mountains around them. "Thank you," she managed finally. "For the shelter, the knife, the warning. You see clearer than most who come from eastern cities," he replied. "Trust what you see, not what others tell you to see." Christine hesitated, then stepped forward and placed her hand lightly on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "I'll return in 7 days." His hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. "I will watch for you." The simple declaration contained more promise than elaborate vows Christine had heard exchanged in Philadelphia's grandest churches. She withdrew her hand reluctantly and turned toward camp. After several steps, she glanced back. Roger still stood where she'd left him, a solitary figure against the vast landscape. He raised his hand once in farewell, then melted into the brush, as if he'd never been there at all. The compass, Christine thought, always showing true north regardless of storms or darkness. She touched the knife in her pocket and continued toward camp with renewed purpose. Martha was the first to spot her approach, running forward with relief clear on her face. "Christine, we've been frantic. Where were you during that terrible storm?" "I found shelter in a cave," Christine replied, offering no further details. "Is everyone all right here?" "Mostly. The Petersons' wagon was struck by lightning, burned completely, and the children are frightened. But we survived." Martha lowered her voice. "Mr. Hatcher has been asking after you repeatedly. Seemed quite concerned." Christine arranged her features into an appropriate expression of appreciation. "How thoughtful. When do we depart for the trading post?" "Within the hour. Jacob wants to make use of daylight, and the trail north wasn't as affected by the flooding." Martha peered at her more closely. "Are you certain you're all right? You seem different somehow." Christine smiled, touching the hidden knife. "Just grateful for safe shelter in the storm." As she moved through camp toward her wagon, Christine felt Hatcher's gaze following her. She turned to meet it directly, refusing to show the wariness Roger had awakened in her. His eyes narrowed slightly at her direct look. Then he tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Miss Weber, I'm relieved to find you unharmed." "The wilderness can be so unpredictable." "Indeed, Mr. Hatcher," she replied evenly. "But I'm learning that danger often wears a more civilized face than we expect." His smile faltered momentarily before returning with practiced charm. "How philosophical." "The supply party leaves within the hour." I trust you're still joining us? Of course, Christine said. I look forward to the journey. As she walked away, Christine could feel the weight of the Apache woman's knife against her thigh. Trust what you see, Roger had said. And what she saw in Elias Hatcher's eyes made her very glad indeed for the blade's presence. The northbound journey proved arduous even with just one wagon and 6 riders. Twice they needed to clear fallen trees, and once a wheel became so deeply mired in mud that it took hours to extract. Hatcher maintained a veneer of gentlemanly concern toward Christine, though she noticed how his eyes hardened whenever she declined his assistance. On the 3rd day, the trading post appeared on the horizon, a cluster of low buildings surrounded by a rough stockade. Smoke from the chimney promised warmth, though Christine felt only growing unease as they approached. Doesn't appear to be much activity, observed Fletcher, one of the men from their wagon train. Sunday services, perhaps, Hatcher suggested smoothly. The proprietor, Daniels, is a God-fearing man. The trading post's yard stood empty when they arrived, not even horses tethered at the hitching posts. Hatcher dismounted first, approaching the main building with confident strides. The door opened before he reached it. A tall, raw-boned man emerged, his shrewd eyes assessing the newcomers. "Right on time, Hatcher," he drawled, making no pretense of surprise at their arrival. "Daniels." Hatcher clasped the man's hand. "Our journey was delayed by the storm." Christine exchanged glances with Fletcher, noting his confusion. Clearly this meeting had been arranged in advance. "Come inside," Daniels invited. "Got food warming." The trading post's interior was surprisingly well appointed, with polished wooden counters and shelves stocked with goods rarely seen on the frontier. A large desk dominated one corner, its surface covered with maps and documents. Christine noticed a surveyor's transit and chain in another corner, unusual equipment for a simple trader. "Miss Weber, allow me to introduce Theodore Daniels," Hatcher said, all courtesy. "Daniels, this is the lady I mentioned in my letter." Daniels' gaze traveled over Christine with unsettling thoroughness. "Didn't expect someone so refined. Frontier usually attracts a hardier sort of female. Miss Weber has proven remarkably adaptable," Hatcher replied before Christine could speak. "And her father's land claim is precisely where we discussed." The casual mention of her father's claim confirmed Christine's suspicions. She feigned ignorance, accepting the bowl of stew Daniels offered. "You gentlemen seem well acquainted," she observed mildly. "Have you known each other long?" "Business associates," Hatcher explained vaguely. "Daniels has interests throughout the territory." "Expanding interests," Daniels corrected with a meaningful look at Hatcher. "Speaking of which, that document you requested is ready." He moved to the desk, retrieving a leather portfolio from a drawer. As he thumbed through papers, Christine caught sight of an unusual item hanging on the wall behind the desk, a framed survey map, elaborately detailed with property boundaries and water sources meticulously marked. Red ink circled several areas, including one Christine recognized as her father's valley. "Remarkable map," she commented, moving closer. "Such detail for unsettled territory." Daniels glanced up sharply. "A railroad company survey, confidential." "Of course," Christine murmured, noting the planned rail line cutting directly through her father's claim. Understanding dawned. Control of that water source would mean controlling access for the railroad itself. Hatcher cleared his throat. "Perhaps Miss Weber would like to rest after our journey. The spare room upstairs should suffice." Christine recognized the dismissal, but pressed further. "The map shows Silver Creek Valley. My father's claim is there." A look passed between the men, irritation from Daniels, warning from Hatcher. "Merely coincidence," Hatcher assured her, "though it does underscore the value of establishing your claim properly. The legal complexities of frontier settlement require experienced guidance." "Indeed," Daniels agreed, extracting a document from the portfolio. "Speaking of which, this territorial filing might interest you, Hatcher." Christine strained to see the paper, but could make out only the territorial seal and what appeared to be a land description. Hatcher scanned it quickly, a satisfied smile spreading across his features. Perfect, he declared, returning the document to the portfolio. We'll proceed as discussed. Christine allowed herself to be escorted upstairs to a small but clean bedroom. Once alone, she pressed her ear to the floor, straining to hear the men's conversation below. Their voices were muffled, but occasional phrases reached her. Needs a husband or male guardian to file. Water rights separate from land. Rights. Apache raids driving settlers to town for protection. Railroad. Paying top dollar. She sat back on her heels, piecing together their scheme. Somehow they intended to use her claim, or wrest control of it, through legal manipulation. The mention of Apache raids particularly troubled her. Were they planning to manufacture danger to drive settlers away from independent homesteads? Night fell as Christine considered her options. The 4 men from their wagon train seemed oblivious to the plotting, already deep in whiskey downstairs. She was effectively alone. A soft tap at her window startled her. Cautiously approaching, Christine peered into the darkness. Nothing visible in the moonless night. Then a small object landed on the sill, a smooth river stone with a spiral pattern painted in red ochre. Only one person could have sent such a message. Roger was nearby, watching. The realization brought both comfort and concern. If he was spotted near the trading post, he would be immediately assumed hostile. Christine placed the stone in her pocket, her fingers brushing against the knife Roger had given her. Tomorrow, she would need to learn more about Hatcher's plans while maintaining her pretense of ignorance. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, a lonely, haunting sound that seemed to echo Christine's growing sense of isolation. Yet the painted stone reminded her she wasn't truly alone. Someone watched from the darkness, someone whose heart now seemed inexplicably linked to her own. The supply expedition lasted precisely as long as Hatcher had planned, 6 days total, with 2 spent at the trading post while goods were assembled. Throughout, Christine maintained her facade of polite ignorance. Even as she gathered damning evidence of the conspiracy, they returned to find the main wagon train had progressed 10 miles west during their absence, following a river that wound through increasingly mountainous terrain. Christine noted with unease how Hatcher studied the landscape, his gaze lingering on water sources and natural bottlenecks where the trail narrowed. "We'll rest here 2 days," Jacob announced after hearing reports of the trading post journey, "then push on towards Silver Creek Pass." Silver Creek Pass, the gateway to her father's valley, and apparently central to Hatcher's plans. Christine feigned exhaustion and retired to her wagon early, but sleep proved elusive. Too many questions, too many dangers circled in her mind. Near midnight, she slipped from camp, following the now familiar pull toward the Waterfall Canyon. The promised 7th day had arrived, and despite the risk, she needed to speak with Roger. The half-moon provided just enough light to follow the trail. Christine moved cautiously, one hand on the Apache knife, alert for any sound. When a shadow detached itself from the boulders near the canyon entrance, she froze, blade half-drawn. "It's me," Roger's voice came softly. Relief flooded through her. "You followed us to the trading post." "I did." He stepped closer, moonlight revealing his face, more grave than usual. "Your trader has dangerous friends." "Conspirators," Christine corrected. "I overheard them planning to manipulate water rights once the railroad comes through." Roger nodded. "They've tried before in other territories, driving independent settlers into town, then claiming abandoned homesteads. But how would they—" Christine stopped as understanding dawned. "The Apache raids they mentioned. They're planning to blame your people for attacks they'll orchestrate themselves." "A common strategy," Roger confirmed bitterly. "Few settlers question who's responsible when fear takes hold." They walked together toward the waterfall, the sound of cascading water masking their conversation from any potential eavesdroppers. "My wagon train moves toward Silver Creek Pass in 2 days," Christine said. "Hatcher will make his move soon." Roger led her to a flat rock overlooking the pool where he'd spread a blanket against the night chill. From a leather satchel nearby, he produced a small clay jar sealed with beeswax. "My mother's recipe," he explained, removing the seal. For clear thinking when decisions matter. The jar contained a dark liquid that smelled of herbs and honey. Roger poured some into 2 wooden cups, offering one to Christine. "What is it?" she asked, sniffing cautiously. "Wild mint, honey, blackberry." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Not everything Apache is mysterious or dangerous." Christine sipped, the sweet, bitter liquid warming her from within. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the night sounds of the canyon creating a peaceful backdrop to their troubled thoughts. "I need to warn the other settlers," Christine said finally. "But they won't believe accusations against Hatcher without proof, and they won't accept my word," Roger added. "To them I am the threat." Christine studied his profile in the moonlight, seeing not the fearsome alpha Apache of legend, but a man caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. "We need a plan," she said, setting down her cup. "Together." Roger turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. "Together?" "An alliance," Christine clarified. "Your knowledge of the territory, my standing with the settlers. We might succeed where either alone would fail." Roger considered this, then nodded slowly. "An alliance," he agreed, the word seeming to carry more meaning than its literal definition. From inside his shirt, Roger withdrew a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. He spread it on the rock between them. "My father made this," he explained, revealing an intricate map of the surrounding territory. Every water source, cave system, game trail, and Apache lookout for 50 miles. Christine leaned closer, amazed at the detail. Unlike the railroad company's survey, this map showed the land as it truly was, living, interconnected, with ancient names in a language she couldn't read. "This is remarkable," she breathed, tracing the route to Silver Creek Valley. "With this, we could stay ahead of Hatcher," Roger finished. "Anticipate his movements." Christine's mind raced with possibilities. "If we can document his meetings with hired guns, or find the forged land documents I glimpsed, or prevent the false raids before they begin," Roger added. "A proper lady shouldn't conspire against respectable businessmen." Christine said with mock seriousness, then smiled. "Fortunately, I've never been entirely proper." Something changed in Roger's expression, a softening, a new openness. "You are unlike any settler woman I've encountered. And you," Christine replied quietly, "are unlike any man, east or west." Their eyes held for a long moment, the alliance between them deepening into something neither was ready to name. Roger broke the silence first, returning to the practical matter at hand. "I can track Hatcher, document his meetings," he offered. "But entering settlements is dangerous for me." "I'll be your eyes in camp," Christine said. "And when we reach Silver Creek, I can search for legal documents, evidence of their scheme." They bent over the map together, heads nearly touching as they formed their strategy. Roger's knowledge of hidden approaches to the valley, coupled with Christine's understanding of legal land claims, created a plan more comprehensive than either could have devised alone. "We have 4 days before the wagon train reaches the valley," Christine calculated. "Not much time." "Enough," Roger assured her. "If we work as one. The phrase lingered between them, carrying implications beyond their immediate conspiracy. Dawn found them still strategizing, the clay jar empty, the map memorized. As golden light touched the canyon walls, Christine reluctantly prepared to return to camp. "I'll look for your signal each night," she said. Referring to their agreed communication method, Roger nodded, then reached into his pouch and withdrew something that glinted in the early light, a silver and turquoise bracelet of Apache design. "Simple yet beautiful, for protection," he said, offering it to her. "And as a reminder," Christine extended her wrist, allowing him to secure the bracelet. "A reminder of what?" His fingers lingered on her skin. That not all alliances are written on paper. The double meaning wasn't lost on her. Christine covered his hand with her own, the touch conveying what words could not yet express. "Until tonight," she said softly. Roger's reply was equally soft, but filled with new certainty. Until tonight. As Christine made her way back to camp, the bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve, She realized the wilderness no longer seemed as threatening as the civilization she'd left behind. Somewhere in this untamed landscape, she had found not just an ally, but something she'd never expected, a man who saw her true self and valued it. The wagon train wound its way through narrowing canyons as it approached Silver Creek Pass. Christine rode, Penny alongside the lead wagon, ostensibly to gather medicinal plants that grew in the rocky terrain. In reality, she was mapping the route against the mental image of Roger's father's map, identifying vulnerable points where Hatcher might stage his false Apache attacks. 3 times since their midnight meeting, she'd spotted Roger's signals. Once a hawk feather placed prominently on a rock she would pass. Twice the distant flash of sunlight on metal, letting her know he watched over their progress. Their alliance, though unorthodox, brought her comfort amid growing tension. Hatcher had grown increasingly distant from the main group. Riding out for hours with Fletcher and 2 other men, Christine now recognized as hired guns rather than genuine settlers. Their absences coincided with reports of suspicious tracks and signs of Indian activity that Jacob took with grave seriousness. "We'll circle the wagons tightly tonight," Jacob announced as they made camp in a sheltered valley. "Double the watch rotation." Christine noticed Hatcher exchange significant glances with his companions. Something was planned for tonight. She felt it with cold certainty. After the evening meal, she retreated to her wagon, removing a small leather-bound journal from its hiding place beneath her mattress. Unlike her personal diary, this journal documented everything she'd observed of Hatcher's conspiracy: dates, conversations, suspicious activities. The writing was encoded using a simple substitution cipher Michael had taught her, a precaution should the journal fall into wrong hands. She added the day's observations, then carefully tucked it away again. As darkness fell, Christine prepared for bed as usual, but remained fully dressed beneath her blankets, the Apache knife secured at her waist. Shortly after midnight she heard it, 3 owl hoots in quick succession, then 2 more after a pause. Not a real owl, but Roger's signal of imminent danger. Christine slipped from her wagon, keeping to the shadows between vehicles. From her vantage point, she could see the night guards stationed at the perimeter, old Mr. Peterson to the north, young Thomas Wallace to the east. Neither was looking in the right direction. Beyond Thomas, barely visible in the moonlight, 5 riders approached from the southeast, moving with deliberate stealth. Christine recognized Fletcher among them, but the others wore bandanas pulled high on their faces and what appeared to be feathered headbands, a crude approximation of Apache warriors. She had moments to act. Darting between wagons, Christine reached Jacob's tent and shook him awake. "Riders approaching from the southeast," she whispered urgently. Disguised as Apache but including Fletcher. To his credit, Jacob asked no questions, immediately reaching for his rifle. "Wake the others, quietly." Christine moved swiftly from tent to tent, whispering warnings. The camp came alive with silent preparation, women loading rifles, men taking defensive positions behind wagons. When she reached Martha's tent, Christine pressed her medical bag into the woman's hands. "Keep this ready," she instructed. "And keep the children down." As Christine turned back toward her own wagon, the first shot rang out, followed immediately by war whoops from the approaching riders. Their plan was obvious now. Attack the camp while posing as Apache, create terror and perhaps casualties, then heroically drive off the attackers. Hatcher would use the incident to convince settlers to abandon isolated homesteads for the safety of his planned settlement. But the camp was ready. Return fire erupted from between the wagons, sending the attackers wheeling in confusion. Their expectation of a panicked, disorganized response was shattered. Christine ducked behind a water barrel as bullets splintered wood nearby. Through the chaos, she spotted a familiar shadow moving along the ridge above the camp. Roger, positioned to observe, but not intervene unless absolutely necessary. Their agreement had been clear. He must not be seen, or he would immediately be blamed regardless of the truth. Fletcher's voice carried across the camp. "Apache attack! Defend the women!" That's Fletcher's voice. Jacob shouted back. "Drop your weapons!" The disguised attackers realized their ruse was failing. They separated, two breaking toward the livestock pen, while the others maintained covering fire. Christine saw their intent immediately. Stealing horses would match the pattern of actual Apache raids, lending credibility to their deception. Without thinking, she sprinted toward the pen, determined to prevent the theft that would cement the false narrative. As she reached the crude gate, one of the riders was already dismounting to open it. Christine drew the Apache knife, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. "Stop right there!" she commanded, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. The man turned, surprise evident even behind his bandana. "Well, well, the doctor lady has claws." He advanced toward her, drawing a long hunting knife of his own. "Should have stayed in your wagon, miss." Christine held her ground. Roger had shown her how to grip the knife, how to stand to maintain balance. Still, facing an armed man twice her size sent fear coursing through her. As he lunged, Christine sidestepped, slashing outward as she'd been instructed. The blade caught the man's arm, drawing a curse and a thin line of blood. He backed up, reassessing her with new respect. "You'll regret that," he growled, circling more cautiously. Behind him, Christine saw a shadow drop silently from the ridge, Roger, abandoning their plan in the face of her danger. Before he could reach them, gunfire erupted nearby. The distraction gave the man his opening. He charged Christine, knocking the knife from her hand and sending her sprawling. As he raised his blade, a stone axe struck his shoulder with devastating force. He collapsed with a strangled cry, revealing Roger standing behind him, another throwing axe already in hand. Their eyes met in the chaos. Acknowledgement, relief, something more. Then Roger melted back into the shadows as voices approached. Jacob and two others arrived, rifles ready. "Christine, are you hurt?" Jacob helped her up, then stared at the groaning attacker. "What happened?" Christine retrieved her knife, thinking quickly. "He fell as I dodged him, must have hit his head on a rock." She nodded toward the dark ridge, silently thanking Roger for his intervention while keeping his presence secret. The attack ended as quickly as it had begun, the fake raiders retreating with one horse and one wounded companion. As the camp regrouped, Christine moved among the settlers, treating minor injuries while listening to the confused conversations. "Those weren't real Apache," insisted Thomas. "I saw white skin when one sleeve tore." "And that was Fletcher's voice," added Mr. Peterson. "I'd stake my life on it." Hatcher appeared, looking appropriately disheveled for someone supposedly awakened by the attack. "What happened?" "I heard shooting." Jacob fixed him with a suspicious stare. "Interesting that Fletcher was with the attackers, Hatcher." "Your friend? Impossible," Hatcher scoffed. "Fletcher rode out earlier to scout the pass. If Apache captured him—" "No one said anything about Apache," Jacob interrupted. "Only men dressed as Apache." Christine watched the calculation in Hatcher's eyes as he realized the deception had failed. But like any good gambler, he merely adjusted his strategy. "A shocking accusation," he said smoothly. "We'll sort this out at daybreak." As the camp settled back into uneasy watchfulness, Christine slipped away briefly to the edge of the perimeter. There, half hidden beneath a juniper bush, she found a small clay figurine, a horse exquisitely detailed despite its size. Carved from red stone, Roger's message was clear. He remained nearby, watchful. The first battle had been won, but the war for Silver Creek Valley had only just begun. The failed raid created exactly what Hatcher had sought to avoid: heightened vigilance and suspicion, not of Apache warriors, but of him and his associates. Fletcher had not returned to camp, and the other conspirators maintained unconvincing ignorance of the entire affair. "We reach Silver Creek Pass tomorrow," Jacob announced the following evening. "Miss Weber, your father's claim lies just beyond, correct?" Christine nodded, acutely aware of Hatcher's intense gaze from across the campfire. "The valley opens up after the pass. Good water, fertile soil. My father chose well. We'll accompany you to survey the boundaries," Jacob offered. "Safety in numbers, especially after last night's incident." Hatcher cleared his throat. If I might suggest, the main party should continue to Fort Laramie. I'd be happy to escort Miss Weber personally, with just a few men for protection. That won't be necessary, Christine replied firmly. I've studied my father's maps extensively. I can manage the final leg alone. Protests erupted immediately, but Christine held firm. She needed freedom to meet with Roger before reaching the valley, to prepare for whatever desperate move Hatcher might attempt next. After much debate, a compromise was reached. Christine would ride ahead with 2 trusted families, while the main train continued its journey after a day's rest. Hatcher's offer was politely declined, much to his poorly concealed irritation. That night, Christine waited until the camp settled into silence before slipping away to their agreed meeting place, a lightning-struck pine visible from the trail. Her heart quickened as she approached, wondering if Roger would come after, risking exposure during the raid. He emerged from the darkness like a manifestation of the night itself, moving without sound. In the moonlight, Christine could see tension in his posture, a new wariness in his eyes. "You could have been killed," he said without preamble. "As could you," she countered. "You weren't supposed to intervene. Would you have preferred I let him kill you?" Christine softened. "No, thank you for saving my life." Roger's expression remained troubled. "The raid failed, but Hatcher won't stop. The valley is worth too much. I know." Christine described the new arrangements for reaching her claim. "We'll be there by tomorrow evening. Whatever he's planning will happen soon." They walked in silence along a game trail, climbing to a ridge that overlooked the sleeping wagon train below. The vast landscape spread before them, painted in silver and shadow by the moon's glow. "There," Roger said, pointing westward where mountains parted to reveal a distant valley. "Silver Creek, your father's claim." Christine followed his gesture, imagining the homestead she would build, the life she had planned. Somehow those plans now seemed incomplete in a way they hadn't before. "I've been thinking," she began carefully, "about what happens after we stop Hatcher." Roger glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You establish your claim, begin your new life, and you?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Roger turned away, gazing across the wilderness. "I return to what I've always been, the Alpha Apache, feared, avoided. It doesn't have to be that way." Christine moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him despite the cool night air. "Doesn't it?" Bitterness edged his voice. "Your settlers would never accept me among them, and I would never abandon my father's ways to become something I'm not. I'm not asking you to." He turned back to her, studying her face as if searching for something. "Then what are you asking?" Christine hesitated, then reached into her pocket and withdrew a simple object that gleamed in the moonlight, a silver thimble that had belonged to her mother. In Philadelphia, when a woman gave a man a thimble, it meant she was asking him to wait for her, she explained softly. That she needed time, but her heart had chosen. Roger looked from the thimble to her face, genuine surprise breaking through his careful composure. "Christine, I don't know how," she continued, words rushing out now, "or what form it would take. I only know that returning to the world I left behind is impossible now. That world doesn't contain—" She paused, gathering courage. "You!" Roger remained still, his dark eyes reflecting moonlight. "You cannot know what you're saying. The life you describe, it doesn't exist, not for people like us." "Then we create it," Christine insisted, pressing the thimble into his palm. "Between your world and mine, in the in-between places, as you called them." His fingers closed around the silver token. "You would be shunned, ostracized, perhaps. Or perhaps we build something new, where others like us could find sanctuary." She smiled faintly. "I'm a healer. You know the land better than any living person. Together, we offer something needed by both settlers and natives alike." Roger's expression softened, hope warring with lifetime of learned caution. "You've thought about this?" "Every day since the waterfall," Christine admitted. "Every night since the cave." His free hand rose to touch her cheek with surprising gentleness. "The man they call the Alpha Apache," he said quietly, "the man who swore no woman would take his heart. I no longer recognize him." Christine covered his hand with hers, turning her face into his palm. "Is that a terrible thing?" "Terrifying," he corrected, but a smile touched his lips. "And liberating." The space between them disappeared as Roger drew her closer. Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips beneath the vast western sky. The second was more certain, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Roger pressed his forehead against hers. "There will be challenges we cannot yet imagine." "I know," Christine whispered. "But first we must secure the valley." "Defeat Hatcher." Roger nodded, reluctantly releasing her. "Tomorrow I'll scout ahead to the claim site. Watch for any of Hatcher's men already positioned there. I'll ensure the families traveling with me are trustworthy," Christine added. "People who will witness any legal manipulations Hatcher attempts." They spent another hour refining their strategy, now infused with new purpose beyond mere alliance. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Roger walked Christine part of the way back to camp. At their parting, he pressed the silver thimble into a leather cord and hung it around his neck, tucking it beneath his shirt near his heart. "For remembering," he said, echoing her words from the cave. "And for returning," she added softly. Roger nodded once, then disappeared into the pre-dawn shadows, moving silently as only he could. Christine watched the spot where he'd vanished for a long moment before turning back toward camp. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt she was heading toward a future rather than away from a past. Silver Creek Valley unfolded before Christine like a painting come to life. Lush grassland bordered by pine-covered slopes, bisected by a clear stream that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. The small party arrived at the site of her father's claim as dusk approached, weary but determined. "It's perfect," Martha whispered, standing beside Christine as they surveyed the natural bowl of land. "Your father chose wisely." The Millers and Andersons, the two families who had accompanied Christine, set about establishing a temporary camp near the remains of a previous structure, likely built by her father years earlier. Just stone foundations remained, but they offered a start. "We'll help you raise proper walls before winter," Mr. Miller promised, already assessing the site with a builder's eye. Christine thanked them while carefully scanning the surrounding ridges. No sign of Roger yet, though she felt certain he watched from somewhere. No sign of Hatcher either, which concerned her more. His absence from the main camp this morning had been conspicuous. As darkness fell, Christine unpacked her father's original land claim documents, spreading them on a flat stone near the campfire. The yellowed parchment bore official territorial seals and precise boundary descriptions, all legally filed and recorded during his expedition years earlier. Most importantly, they clearly established water rights to the creek. She was studying these when she noticed young Timothy Anderson pointing toward the eastern ridge. "Ma! Riders coming!" Christine stood quickly, following his gesture. In the fading light, she could make out at least 8 mounted men approaching, far too many for coincidence, everyone inside the foundation walls. She ordered calmly, "Mr. Miller, Mr. Anderson, your rifles ready, please." The children were hustled into the center of the stone rectangle while the adults took defensive positions. Christine retrieved her father's old cavalry spyglass from her saddlebag, extending it to identify the approaching party. Hatcher rode at the front, flanked by Daniels from the trading post. Behind them came Fletcher, confirming his role in the earlier raid, and 5 rough-looking men Christine didn't recognize. "Stay calm," she instructed the others. "They're likely here to intimidate, not attack outright." The riders stopped 30 yards from the camp, just close enough for conversation without entering rifle range. Hatcher urged his horse forward alone, raising his hands to show peaceful intent. "Miss Weber," he called. "A word, if you please." Christine stepped through the gap in the foundation walls, ignoring Martha's protests. She walked halfway to Hatcher's position, then stopped. "This is legally claimed land, Mr. Hatcher. State your business." Hatcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Such hostility. I've come to offer protection. There's been troubling Apache activity recently." How curious that it follows you so closely, Christine replied evenly. His expression hardened momentarily before the mask of civility returned. I've also brought a territorial official. Mr. Daniels is a duly appointed land registrar. There are irregularities with your claim that require immediate attention. Christine felt a chill despite the warm evening. My papers are in perfect order. Perhaps for the land itself, Hatcher acknowledged. But water rights in this territory follow separate filing procedures. Your father's claim neglected certain technical requirements, understanding dawned. This was their strategy, not to challenge the land claim directly, but to separate the water rights, rendering the property essentially worthless. How fortunate that my father filed supplementary water rights documentation before his death, Christine improvised smoothly. I have them with my papers. Uncertainty flickered across Hatcher's face. I'm afraid you're mistaken. No such filing exists in territorial records. Records can be altered, Christine countered. Originals cannot. A tense silence stretched between them. Christine could feel the weight of multiple gazes, the settlers behind her, Hatcher's men watching from horseback. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, she was certain, Roger's vigilant eyes. This need not be adversarial, Hatcher said finally, his tone softening to something almost reasonable. The territory is changing. The railroad changes everything. There's an opportunity here for mutual benefit. I'm listening, Christine replied, though she had no intention of conceding. A business arrangement. You maintain titular ownership of the land claim, with certain easements for water access. He leaned forward in his saddle. In exchange, we provide protection, supplies, infrastructure. Your homestead becomes the center of a new settlement, with you as a respected founding figure. It was cleverly framed, offering status and security while effectively surrendering control of the valley's most valuable resource. Less perceptive settlers had likely accepted similar arrangements elsewhere, and if I decline, Hatcher straightened, all pretense of warmth vanishing, then we'll be forced to contest the claim formally, during which time this valley would be considered disputed territory, ineligible for military protection should Apache raids occur. He gestured to the families behind her. A dangerous situation for women and children. The threat was unmistakable. Christine maintained a neutral expression despite her racing heart. I'll need time to consider and to review my documentation. Of course, Hatcher agreed too readily. We'll camp nearby and return for your answer tomorrow. He tipped his hat. Consider carefully, Miss Weber. Opportunity seldom knocks twice. As he rejoined his men, Christine returned to the foundation walls, where the others waited with anxious expressions. What did he want? Mr. Miller asked. To steal this land through legal manipulation, Christine answered honestly. And he's threatened violence if that fails, instead of the fear she expected. Determination hardened the settlers' faces. My Henry stopped 3 Comanche raids in Texas, Mrs. Anderson said firmly, checking her husband's rifle. We didn't come this far to be bullied by men in fancy coats. Christine felt a surge of gratitude. They'll be back tomorrow with more men. We should prepare. As they reinforced their position, Christine noticed a small object that hadn't been there before, resting on her father's documents. A carved wooden chess piece. A knight with a tiny piece of paper wrapped around it. She palmed it discreetly, waiting until she could slip away to read the message. Roger's handwriting was precise and clear. 8 more men approaching from north. Hatcher's reinforcements. I've sent for help from White Buffalo's camp. Hold until dawn. Christine tucked the message away, drawing strength from knowing Roger was out there, working to secure allies. They would need to survive the night first. Mr. Miller, she called, let's move the wagons to form a better defensive perimeter. As darkness claimed the valley, pinpricks of light appeared on the surrounding ridges. Hatcher's men establishing positions surrounding the claim site. The siege had begun. Night settled fully over Silver Creek Valley, bringing with it an uneasy quiet. The besieged homesteaders maintained watch in shifts, Christine using the time to inventory their supplies and ammunition. They had food for 3 days if rationed carefully. water from the creek that ran conveniently close to their position. But ammunition worried her, fewer than 40 rounds between them. Shortly after midnight, a bird call sounded from the darkness, 3 quick notes, then 2 slower ones. The signal sent Christine's heart racing. She slipped away from the sleeping families, moving silently to the back of their makeshift fortification where the stone foundation met the creek bank. Roger materialized from the shadows, crouching low. His face was painted with dark stripes, war colors, Christine realized with a start. How bad? He asked without preamble. 16 men that we've counted, positioned on all surrounding ridges. Christine kept her voice barely above a whisper. They're waiting for something, reinforcements, perhaps, or simply daybreak. Roger nodded grimly. Daniel sent riders to Fort Laramie, claiming Apache raids. If the cavalry responds, they'll find us under attack and assume it's your people, Christine finished, understanding dawning. A perfect solution for Hatcher. Either we surrender the claim, or we die defending it with no witnesses to contradict his story. White Buffalo's riders have been delayed, Roger continued. They won't arrive before tomorrow evening. Christine closed her eyes briefly, calculating odds that grew increasingly dire. We won't last that long. Not against 16 men with military experience. Roger was silent for a moment, his gaze distant, assessing. There is another way. Something in his tone made Christine study him more carefully. What are you thinking? From inside his shirt, Roger withdrew a leather-bound field compass, the one Christine had given him in the cave. Its brass casing gleamed dully in the faint moonlight. My father once drew half the U.S. cavalry away from an Apache camp, he said, turning the compass in his palm. One rider, many fires, creating the illusion of a larger force. Understanding dawned with terrible clarity. You want to draw them away from us? Half their force, at minimum, Roger confirmed. Created chaos, weakened siege lines. It's too dangerous, Christine protested. They'll hunt you instead of us. Better one Apache warrior they already hate than settlers they need alive to maintain their story. His logic was impeccable. His determination clear. There must be another way. Christine reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. If something happened to you, I know these mountains better than they ever will, Roger interrupted gently. I won't engage directly. Create confusion, lead them away, disappear. But Christine had seen the war paint, recognized the resolute set of his jaw. This was no simple diversion he planned, but something far more dangerous. You're lying, she whispered. You intend to draw them into a fight. Roger's silence confirmed her fear. He would sacrifice himself to save her, the settlers, the claim, everything they had fought for together. I won't let you do this, Christine said firmly. We wait for White Buffalo's men, together. There's no time. Roger's voice was gentle but unyielding. Hatcher grows desperate. Desperate men take risks, harm innocents. His free hand rose to touch her cheek. Children sleep behind those walls, Christine. The truth of his words struck her like physical pain. The Andersons' young sons, Martha's daughter, innocent lives that would mean nothing to Hatcher if they stood between him and the valley's water rights. When would you go? She asked, resignation creeping into her voice. Before dawn, when night still offers cover, but men grow weary on watch. Christine fought back tears, anger and fear warring within her. And if she couldn't bring herself to finish the thought, Roger lifted the compass between them. True north never changes, he said simply. Whatever happens, follow it to the eastern ridge after sunset tomorrow. Either I will meet you there, or White Buffalo's son will lead you to safety. The practicality of the backup plan told Christine everything about his expectation of survival. Still, she nodded, committing the instructions to memory. I'll need a distraction from inside your camp, Roger continued. Something to draw eyes away from the southern approach momentarily. Christine thought quickly. A cooking fire collapse. Sparks, commotion. Easy to stage. Good. Roger's approval was evident. 3 owl hoots will signal when I'm in position. They discussed tactical details for several more minutes, speaking as allies and strategists rather than acknowledging the deeper emotions threatening to overwhelm them both. Finally, when all was arranged, silence fell between them. I should return before they notice my absence, Christine said, not moving. Roger nodded, similarly still. In the dim light, his features seemed carved from stone, yet his eyes held an intensity she had come to treasure. "Christine," he began, his voice different now, rougher with suppressed emotion. "If I don't," she interrupted fiercely. "Don't say it." Instead of speaking further, Roger reached up to his neck and removed something that had been hidden beneath his shirt, an intricate beaded necklace with a small doeskin pouch attached. He placed it gently around Christine's neck. "My mother's medicine bundle," he explained quietly. "Apache tradition says it carries the protection of ancestors." The significance staggered her. This was no mere token, but a sacred family heirloom, perhaps his most personal possession. "Roger, I can't accept this. It's too important. As are you," he said simply. The words hung in the night air between them, more powerful than any elaborate declaration. Christine felt tears threaten again, and blinked them back fiercely. "This is not goodbye," she insisted, her fingers closing around the medicine bundle. "I expect its return tomorrow evening." A ghost of a smile touched Roger's lips. "Yes, ma'am." He leaned forward then, one hand cradling the back of her head as he kissed her, not tentatively as before, but with passionate intensity, as if imprinting the memory of her upon himself. When they parted, Christine struggled to find words equal to the moment. "Be careful," she finally whispered, inadequate but heartfelt. "Always." Roger pressed his forehead briefly against hers, then pulled back, his expression shifting to the focused alertness of a warrior preparing for battle. "Remember, Eastern Ridge after sunset." Before she could respond, he melted into the darkness with uncanny silence, leaving Christine clutching the medicine bundle. Its unfamiliar weight against her heart, both comfort and burden, she returned to the camp with outward composure, though everything within her screamed to call him back, to find another way. Instead, she checked on the sleeping children, adjusted blankets with gentle hands, and prepared herself for the role she must play when the owl's call came. Whatever happened before dawn, Christine knew with bone-deep certainty that Silver Creek Valley and her life would never be the same again. 3 owl hoots pierced the pre-dawn silence. Christine moved immediately, knocking over a coffee pot near the small fire as planned. The resulting hiss and scatter of embers created just enough commotion to draw the attention of Hatch's sentries. In that crucial moment of distraction, a series of war cries erupted from the southern ridge, followed by flickering torches, moving in patterns that suggested multiple warriors. Roger's diversion had begun. Shouts of alarm spread through Hatcher's men. Christine watched through a gap in the stone foundation as confusion rippled across their positions. Within minutes, riders were mounting, receiving hasty orders from Fletcher. "Apache attack! South Ridge!" The cry spread. Exactly as Roger had intended, more than half of Hatch's force galloped toward the apparent threat, leaving their siege positions weakened. Christine silently thanked Roger for his tactical brilliance while praying for his safety. As daylight gradually illuminated the valley, sporadic gunfire echoed from the distant ridges. Christine organized the settlers, reinforcing their defenses, while Hatcher's remaining men maintained an increasingly uncertain perimeter. By mid-morning, no riders had returned from the southern pursuit. Anxiety visibly affected the remaining besiegers, who clustered closer together, casting frequent glances toward the continuing sounds of distant conflict. "Something's wrong," Martha whispered, joining Christine at her observation point. "Why aren't they returning?" Christine allowed herself a small grim smile. "Because they're chasing ghosts." Around noon, a rider appeared on the eastern ridge, not from Hatch's men, but a young Apache warrior who surveyed the scene briefly before disappearing again. One of White Buffalo's scouts, Christine realized. Help was coming, just as Roger had promised. The afternoon brought an unexpected development. Dust on the Western Trail announced new arrivals, not Hatch's reinforcements, but the main wagon train, led by Jacob himself. Hatcher emerged from his camp immediately. riding to intercept the newcomers before they could reach Christine's position. Even from a distance, his agitated gestures were visible as he spoke urgently with Jacob. "What's happening?" Mr. Anderson asked, joining Christine at the wall. "Hatcher's trying to control the narrative," she replied, "claiming we're under Apache attack most likely." But Jacob wasn't so easily manipulated. After a brief exchange, he left Hatcher and led the wagon train directly toward Christine's fortified position. Hatcher's face contorted with rage. He shouted something to his remaining men, who reluctantly formed a line to block the approaching wagons. "They're going to fire on our own people," Christine realized with horror. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Anderson, we need to create a distraction." Before they could act, a thunder of hoofbeats sounded from the eastern ridge. At least 20 riders appeared, half of them Apache warriors, half settlers from neighboring homesteads. At their head rode White Buffalo himself, distinguished by his impressive headdress. The arrival of this unexpected force caused Hatcher's men to hesitate, caught between multiple threats. Jacob seized the moment, leading the wagon train in a swift detour around the uncertain gunmen to reach Christine's position. Reunion was brief but joyous, as Jacob explained. "We met a rider yesterday, older Apache gentleman, who introduced himself as White Buffalo. Said you needed assistance against false claimants." "Roger sent him," Christine confirmed, scanning the surrounding chaos for any sign of the man who had risked everything for her. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically. Hatcher's forces were now outnumbered and surrounded, with White Buffalo's warriors controlling the high ground and settlers occupying defensible positions below. Hatcher himself seemed to realize the reversal. He conferred briefly with Daniels, then rode forward under a makeshift white flag. Christine stepped out to meet him, Jacob and White Buffalo flanking her in silent support. "This has gone far enough," Hatcher announced, his smooth veneer cracking under pressure. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding." "Save your lies," Christine interrupted. "We have witnesses to your siege, your threats, and your fraudulent claims about water rights." Daniels pushed his horse forward. "As a territorial official—" "You're no official," Jacob cut in. "I telegraphed Fort Laramie 2 days ago. They've never heard of a land registrar named Daniels." Color drained from Daniels' face as Hatcher shot him a venomous look. "Furthermore," Christine continued, withdrawing a folded document from her pocket, "I have here the legal water rights documentation, properly filed by my father and certified by the territorial governor himself." She hadn't mentioned this document to anyone, not even Roger, the final ace she had kept hidden until this moment. She discovered it sewn into the binding of her father's journal during the long night, waiting for Roger's signal. Hatcher's composure crumbled completely. "This is absurd." "Fletcher!" he shouted, looking around for his missing lieutenant. "Where are my men?" As if in answer, a commotion arose from the southern ridge. Several of Hatcher's men appeared, disheveled and exhausted, some nursing minor wounds. Fletcher was not among them. "Apache devil," one gasped upon reaching Hatcher. "Led us through hell itself. Ambushes, dead ends, rock slides." Fletcher and 3 others went down a ravine. "Don't know if they survived." Christine felt simultaneous relief that Roger had survived and concern for his continued absence. Where was he now? The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. White Buffalo addressed Hatcher directly, his English accented but clear. "You leave this valley now, never return?" With his scheme in ruins and his men demoralized, Hatcher had no choice but to retreat. As he turned his horse, he fixed Christine with a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "No deed or document will protect you forever." "Perhaps not," came a new voice, causing all heads to turn. Roger stood at the edge of the clearing, bloodied but upright, holding an ornate tin box Christine had never seen before. His clothing was torn, his face bearing fresh scratches, but his eyes burned with triumph. "But these might," he continued, approaching slowly to hand the box to Christine. She opened it to find papers bearing territorial seals. Deeds, surveys, and damning correspondence between Hatcher, Daniels, and railroad officials detailing their scheme to defraud settlers throughout the region. found in Fletcher's saddlebags, Roger explained. When he fell from that ravine, the evidence was overwhelming. With multiple witnesses now present, Hatcher's criminal conspiracy stood exposed beyond any possibility of denial. "Jacob," Christine said calmly, "would you escort Mr. Hatcher and his associates to Fort Laramie? I believe the territorial governor will be most interested in this documentation." Hatcher's final look of defeated rage as settlers surrounded him would remain etched in Christine's memory for years to come, but it paled compared to the joy of seeing Roger alive, standing tall beside her as the valley, their valley, was finally secured. Only as the prisoners were led away did Christine notice Roger swaying slightly on his feet. He had hidden his injuries well, but the toll of his one-man campaign was evident now that the danger had passed. "You need medical attention," she said softly, moving to support him. Roger's tired smile held a hint of his usual stoicism. "I've had worse." As she helped him toward her tent, White Buffalo approached, speaking briefly in Apache before clasping Roger's shoulder with evident respect. "What did he say?" Christine asked when they were alone. Roger's expression softened. "That no man deserves a woman of such courage, and that perhaps the Alpha Apache has finally met his match." Christine smiled, helping him sit while she gathered medical supplies. "And has he?" Roger reached for her hand, drawing her close despite his injuries. "Long before today," he admitted quietly. "At a waterfall when a settler woman didn't run, autumn painted Silver Creek, valley in russet and gold as the first permanent structure rose from the foundation stones, a sturdy cabin of pine logs, with a stone chimney promising warmth against approaching winter. The homestead had grown steadily over the 3 months since Hatcher's defeat, with neighboring settlers often lending hands for major construction. Christine stood on the porch, surveying all they had accomplished. The vegetable garden was harvested and preserved, the root cellar stocked, and a small stable housed Penny alongside a paint horse nearly identical to Roger's former mount. Most surprising was the steady stream of visitors, settlers seeking medical treatment, Apache families trading herbs and knowledge, all finding welcome at the unusual homestead that straddled 2 worlds. Word had returned from Fort Laramie that Hatcher and Daniels faced prosecution for multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Their elaborate scheme to control water rights throughout the territory had collapsed entirely, with Roger's recovered documents exposing similar operations in 3 other valleys. "Miss Weber." Christine turned to see Martha approaching with her daughter. They had established their claim just 2 miles downriver, close enough for regular visits. "Sarah's cough is much improved with that cherry bark syrup," Martha reported, beaming. "You've a gift, truly." "The recipe came from White Buffalo's healer," Christine admitted. "I merely prepared it." They chatted companionably until Martha noticed the position of the sun. "We should head back before dark. Will you join us for Sunday dinner this weekend?" "Several families are gathering," Christine smiled. "We'd be delighted." The "we" still felt new on her tongue, a simple word that encompassed a profound change in her life. After Martha departed, Christine returned to her task of organizing the small apothecary she'd established in one corner of the cabin. Shelves lined the walls, holding neatly labeled jars of dried herbs, tinctures, and salves that combined her Eastern medical knowledge with traditional Apache remedies. The door opened quietly as Roger entered, carrying freshly cut firewood. 3 months of proper meals and healing had restored his strength, though new scars joined old ones as testament to his one-man war against Hatcher's forces. "Anderson's youngest boy is following buffalo tracks again," he reported, stacking the wood beside the stone fireplace. "Had to redirect him twice today." Christine smiled at the casual domesticity of the comment. Roger had adapted to his new role with surprising grace, part protector, part guide, increasingly accepted by neighboring settlers who had initially regarded him with suspicion. "Will you take him tracking properly when the snow comes?" she asked. "His father mentioned he's eager to learn," Roger nodded, brushing wood chips from his buckskin shirt, no longer the war clothing of the Alpha Apache, but the practical garment of a man with roots in two cultures. White Buffalo's son brings news, he added, his tone shifting to something more serious. Cavalry patrols are increasing near Red Rock Canyon. More settlers expected in spring. Christine understood his concern. Their unusual arrangement, a white woman and a half-Apache man living together, creating a neutral ground between cultures, existed in a fragile balance that could easily be disturbed by newcomers bearing old prejudices. "We knew this would come," she said gently. "The frontier never stays frontier for long." Roger joined her by the window, both gazing out at the valley that had become their shared domain. "Some of White Buffalo's people talk of moving further west. Following the buffalo." The unspoken question hung between them. Would they eventually need to do the same? To leave this place they had fought so hard to secure? "This is our home," Christine said firmly, reaching for his hand. "Whatever comes, we face it here." Roger's fingers intertwined with hers, the silver band on his left hand catching the afternoon light. Its match adorned her own finger, simple bands they had exchanged in a ceremony that honored both their traditions, witnessed by settlers and Apache alike 2 months earlier. "I never expected this life," he admitted, his usual stoicism softening when they were alone. "After my parents died, I believed solitude was my only path. And I never expected to find home in a wilderness," Christine replied, "or to find that the fearsome Alpha Apache would make an excellent husband." Roger's rare smile appeared, the one reserved only for her. From a shelf nearby, he took down a small object that had arrived just yesterday by courier from Fort Laramie. A miniature clock fashioned of polished brass, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. "The territorial governor's thanks," he explained, winding the delicate mechanism. "For exposing Hatcher's network." Christine watched as he placed the clock carefully on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, a touch of civilization in their frontier home, marking time in a life neither of them could have imagined before the waterfall. "It suits us," she observed. "Eastern craftsmanship in a Western setting. Like us," she thought, but didn't need to say. Their story had already become something of a legend in the territory, the Alpha Apache and the Eastern Healer, who had defeated corruption and created something entirely new on the frontier. As twilight gathered, they settled on the porch to watch the sunset paint the valley in brilliant hues. From the nearby ridge came the distant sound of White Buffalo's people singing, a welcome rather than a threat, a celebration of harvest and coming winter. "Any regrets?" Christine asked softly, leaning against Roger's shoulder. He was quiet for a long moment, his arm around her a solid anchor in a world of constant change. "None," he finally answered, "though I do wonder what happened to the man who once declared no woman could take his heart." Christine smiled, nestling closer as the first stars appeared above the mountains. "I believe," she murmured, "he simply hadn't met the right woman at the waterfall." Roger pressed a kiss to her temple, his silent agreement more eloquent than words. Together, they watched darkness claim their valley, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced Hatcher, side by side, 2 worlds united in one heart, finally, willingly taken.